Shalom to you from oneforisrael.org. This week's parasha, Vayigash, continues the exciting story of Joseph in Egypt. But today we are asking the question, what does Joseph have to do with Yeshua? And what does his rejection by his brothers have to do with Israel's rejection of the Messiah? We pick up the story with the final encounter of Joseph and his brothers in Egypt. Last week we saw that Jacob's sons went down to Egypt to obtain food, not knowing that their greatest fear is about to come true. Joseph, their brother, is alive and he remembers everything. At first, Joseph puts his brothers to the test twice, to see if they had learned their lesson after all these years. Both tests have to do with Benjamin, Rachel's only other son, and both are meant to test the brothers' character. Would they callously take also Benjamin away from his father, just as they did some 20 years ago with Joseph? Or would they attempt to save him from such a fate? Surprisingly, in both cases it is Judah who years ago said, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites," who now rises to the occasion. First, he offers himself to Jacob as a guarantee for Benjamin's safety, and in this week's portion he offers himself as a slave to the Egyptian ruler just so Benjamin could go free. "Please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father." It is at this point that Joseph breaks down. He sees that Judah, in many ways the worst of his brothers, had indeed changed. Unable to contain himself, Joseph orders everyone except for his brothers to leave the room. And for the first time, when Joseph is alone with his own brothers, he reveals to them his true identity. "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." In the New Testament, in Acts chapter 7, we find a wonderful midrash or homily on this story. Before his death, Stephen delivers a powerful message to the people, illustrating from Israel's history that although Yeshua was rejected, he is nonetheless the promised deliverer. One such illustration is Moses, who was rejected by his people the first time he attempted to deliver them, but was accepted the second time when he returned to Egypt some 40 years later. Another illustration is from the life of Joseph. Here is what Stephen says in Acts 7, 9-14. "And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who made him ruler over Egypt and over all his household. Now there came a famine throughout all Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers on their first visit, and on the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and summoned Jacob and his father and all his kindred, 75 persons in all." Both with Moses and with Joseph, Stephen is making the same point. Both men were raised by God to deliver Israel, but both were initially rejected by their own people and only later accepted. Only when Moses returned the second time he was received as a savior, and only on the second visit did Joseph reveal himself to his brothers. Stephen's argument is clear. The rejection of Yeshua is no different than that of Moses and Joseph, who all would agree were sent as deliverers to Israel. And their delayed acceptance only foreshadows that of Yeshua. Israel now largely rejects him, but will later accept him. Together with Stephen, we plead with our people even today to recognize this pattern of initial rejection and later acceptance, and believe that though Yeshua was rejected, he nevertheless is the only Savior whom God has raised for our ultimate rescue from sin. He is the prophet like unto Moses and our brother Joseph, who God has sent before us to preserve life. That is all for this week, but please join us next week for another installment of 5 Alive. Wishing you God's shalom from One for Israel, and don't forget to share.